This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
Spring had arrived at last. With it came a restlessness that stirred deep within Mole's underground burrow. The air felt different, charged with possibility, as if the very earth was whispering secrets of adventure. Mole, usually content with his quiet life below ground, found himself distracted from his annual spring cleaning. His paws moved mechanically across the dusty floor, but his mind wandered to places unknown. The broom scraped against the packed earth, each stroke seeming to echo the beating of Mole's heart. He paused, listening to the faint sounds filtering down from above. Bird song, the rustle of new leaves, the distant babble of a stream. These sounds, once barely noticed, now called to him with an irresistible pull. In a moment of uncharacteristic boldness, Mole cast aside his broom. It clattered to the floor, the sound sharp in the stillness of his burrow. His heart raced as he began to dig upwards, paws working furiously through the cool, damp soil. The earth gave way easily, as if encouraging his escape. As Mole neared the surface, a sliver of light pierced the darkness. It grew brighter with each passing second, until finally, with one last push, he broke through. The world exploded into color and light. Mole blinked rapidly, his eyes watering as they adjusted to the brilliant sunlight. The meadow stretched before him, a riot of color and life. Wildflowers dotted the landscape, their petals a rainbow against the lush green grass. The warmth of the sun caressed his fur, so different from the cool darkness of his home. Fresh air filled his lungs, carrying with it the scent of earth and growing things. Mole took his first tentative steps into this new world. The grass tickled his paws, and each breath brought new scents. Sweet flowers, rich earth, the tang of something he couldn't quite identify. Birdsong filled the air, a joyous melody that seemed to welcome him to this wondrous place. As he wandered through the meadow, each new discovery filled Mole with awe. A butterfly fluttered past, its wings a kaleidoscope of blues and oranges. He watched, transfixed, as it alighted on a nearby dandelion, its delicate legs barely bending the stem. Suddenly, a new scent caught Mole's attention. It was fresh and inviting, unlike anything he'd encountered before. Curiosity piqued, he followed his nose, pushing through tall grass and ducking under low-hanging branches. The sound of running water grew louder, and soon Mole found himself at the edge of a riverbank. The sight took his breath away. The water sparkled like a river of diamonds, sunlight dancing on its surface. The gentle current created a soothing rhythm, a song that seemed to call to something deep within Mole's soul. He stood transfixed, watching the play of light and shadow on the water, feeling a strange new longing stirring in his heart. Lost in his reverie, Mole barely noticed the approach of another creature. A cheerful voice broke through his thoughts, startling him back to reality. "Hello there. I don't believe I've seen you around these parts before." Mole turned, coming face to face with a sleek, friendly-looking animal. The newcomer's whiskers twitched with curiosity as he regarded Mole with bright, intelligent eyes. There was something immediately likable about this creature, an air of confidence and warmth that put Mole at ease despite his natural shyness. "I'm Water Rat," the creature introduced himself, his voice as warm as the spring sunshine. "But most folks just call me Rat. And who might you be?" "I'm Mole," he replied, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look. His fur was still dusty from his burrow, and he felt clumsy and awkward next to the graceful Rat. I've never been above ground before today." Rat's eyes widened with delight, his whole face lighting up. "Well then, you've picked a perfect day for your first adventure. How would you like to see the river up close? I've got a lovely little boat, and there's nothing quite like a ride on the water on a day like this." Mole hesitated, his natural timidity warring with his newfound sense of adventure. The water, beautiful as it was, looked deep and swift. I don't know how to swim," he admitted, casting a nervous glance at the flowing river. Rat's smile was reassuring, his eyes kind. "Not to worry, my friend. You'll be safe as houses with me. I've lived on this river all my life, and I know every current and eddy. What do you say we give it a try?" Something in Rat's confident manner put Mole at ease. He found himself nodding, a mixture of excitement and trepidation bubbling up inside him. As they climbed into Rat's boat, Mole's heart raced. The craft rocked gently as they pushed off from the shore, and Mole gripped the sides tightly, his eyes wide with wonder. As they glided along the river, Rat pointed out the sights with the enthusiasm of a seasoned tour guide. "Over there, that's where the kingfishers nest," he explained, gesturing to a high bank where brilliant bluebirds darted in and out of small holes. "And just around this bend, you'll see the most magnificent willow tree you've ever laid eyes on." True to Rat's word, the willow soon came into view. Its graceful branches dipped low, their slender leaves brushing the water's surface like trailing fingers. Mole gasped in awe, feeling as though he had entered a magical realm. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating dappled patterns on the water that danced and shifted with the current. Throughout their journey, they encountered other river dwellers. A family of ducks paddled by, the mother keeping a watchful eye on her ducklings as they bobbed in the boat's wake. An otter surfaced nearby, sleek and playful, before diving back down in search of fish. A majestic swan glided past, its long neck arched proudly as it regarded them with regal disdain. As the day wore on and the sun began to dip towards the horizon, Rat steered the boat back towards his home. The sky was painted in brilliant hues of orange and pink, the colors reflecting off the water and bathing everything in a warm, golden light. Mole found himself filled with a curious mixture of contentment and excitement. The day's adventures had awakened something new within him, a thirst for more experiences and a desire to learn all he could about this wondrous world above ground. As they stepped onto the shore, Mole turned to his new friend. His voice was filled with gratitude and a touch of hesitation as he spoke. "Rat," he said, "would it be all right if I stayed with you for a while? I'm not sure I'm ready to go back to my old life just yet." Rat's face lit up with genuine pleasure, his eyes twinkling with joy. "My dear Mole, nothing would make me happier. There's so much more I want to show you. This is just the beginning of your adventures, I promise you that." As they walked together towards Rat's cozy riverside home, Mole felt a profound sense of change settling over him. He knew, deep in his heart, that this day marked the start of something extraordinary, a friendship that would lead him on countless adventures and forever alter the course of his life. The sun had almost set by the time they reached Rat's home, casting long shadows across the riverbank. As Rat pushed open the door, inviting Mole into his world, a sudden gust of wind rustled through the reeds. It carried with it a hint of something wild and unknown, a promise of adventures yet to come. Mole paused on the threshold, his nose twitching as he caught the scent. He turned to Rat, a question forming on his lips, but the words died away as he saw the gleam in his new friend's eyes. What new wonders would tomorrow bring? Rat's enthusiasm for the river was infectious. His passion for life on the water was something he eagerly wanted to share with Mole. The sun danced on the river's surface, casting diamond-like sparkles that mesmerized the novice boater. Mole's paws trembled slightly as Rat guided them to the oars, the unfamiliar weight both exciting and daunting. "Gently now," Rat encouraged, his whiskers twitching with barely contained excitement. "Feel the water's resistance? That's it." His voice was warm and patient, a stark contrast to the cool breeze that ruffled their fur. At first, Mole's strokes were clumsy, splashing more than propelling, but with each pull his confidence grew. The boat rocked beneath them, a wooden cradle on the flowing current. Rat's expert guidance transformed the unfamiliar into a thrilling adventure, and Mole felt a surge of pride with each successful stroke. "Look there!" Rat suddenly exclaimed, his paw shooting out to point at a brilliant flash of blue. "A kingfisher!" Mole's eyes widened, trying to follow Rat's gesture. "And over there, water voles. They're shy little fellows." The voles scurried along the bank, their tiny paws leaving delicate imprints in the mud. Mole's senses were overwhelmed. The rustling reeds whispered secrets of the riverbank, while the occasional plop of a jumping fish sent ripples across the water's surface. The sweet scent of wildflowers carried on the breeze, a perfume so different from the earthy smells of his underground home. It was a symphony of sensations, each one new and thrilling. As days melted into weeks, Mole's love for the river grew as steadily as his boating skills. Picnics became a daily ritual, with Rat packing baskets that seemed to defy the laws of space. Cold chicken, still juicy and fragrant, nestled beside crusty French rolls that crackled satisfyingly when bitten. Ginger beer bottles clinked merrily as they found the perfect spot on a sun-dappled bank, the grass cool and inviting beneath their paws. This is living. Mole sighed contentedly, wiggling his toes in the lush green blades. The simple pleasure of a riverside meal filled him with a joy he had never known in his solitary, underground existence. Rat beamed, his eyes crinkling with pleasure at his friend's happiness. "Wait until you meet some of the others," he said, a twinkle in his eye that promised more adventures to come. Their first visit to Badger's home in the wild wood left Mole both intimidated and intrigued. The forest loomed dark and mysterious, a stark contrast to the open riverbank. Badger's den was a labyrinth of cozy rooms, filled with the comforting scent of wood smoke and dried herbs. The old creature's gruff exterior was as prickly as the burrs that clung to Mole's fur, but Rat's reassuring presence bolstered his courage. "Don't mind his growling," Rat whispered, his breath warm against Mole's ear. "Badger's bark is worse than his bite." True to Rat's words, Badger's gruff exterior melted away as the evening wore on, revealing a wealth of wisdom and unexpected kindness that left Mole feeling warm and welcomed. The Grand Toad Hall was a stark contrast, a mansion of opulence that left Mole slack-jawed. Polished wood gleamed in the sunlight, and plush carpets muffled their footsteps. Mr. Toad himself was a whirlwind of energy and eccentricity, his voice booming through the halls as he regaled them with tales of his latest obsessions. "Motor cars!" Toad exclaimed, his eyes gleaming with a fervor that was both exciting and slightly alarming. "The future, I tell you!" His webbed hands gesticulated wildly, nearly knocking over a delicate vase. Rat rolled his eyes good-naturedly, clearly used to Toad's enthusiasms. Mole, however, found himself caught up in the infectious excitement, even as he sensed Rat's concern. The world seemed to be expanding before his eyes, filled with wonders he had never imagined. As summer's lushness gave way to autumn's golden hues, Mole discovered the unwritten rules that bound the riverbank community together. A nod here, a helping paw there. The web of mutual support was as intricate as a spider's silk and just as strong. He watched in awe as neighbors came together to help harvest nuts, repair homes damaged by storms, and prepare for the coming winter. "We look out for each other," Rat explained one crisp morning as they helped a family of ducks prepare for migration. The air was filled with honking calls and the rustle of feathers as the ducks practiced their formation. "That's what makes this place special." Mole's heart swelled with a sense of belonging he had never known before. He thought of his old home, snug but lonely, and marveled at how much his world had expanded. The riverbank wasn't just a place, it was a community, a family. The day Mole first swam was a triumph etched forever in his memory. The water lapped at his fur, cool and inviting, but also terrifyingly vast. He splashed and floundered at first, panic rising in his throat like bile. But Rat's steady presence and gentle encouragement saw him through, a lighthouse guiding him through choppy waters. "I'm doing it," Mole cried, his strokes becoming smoother with each passing moment. "I'm swimming." The joy in his voice was palpable, ringing out across the river. Rat's proud smile was brighter than the sun glinting off the water. "I knew you had it in you, old chap." His words warmed Mole more than any sunbeam could. As the golden days of autumn deepened, painting the world in rich reds and oranges, Mole reflected on his journey. From a timid underground dweller to a confident riverbanker, he had found not just a new home, but a true friend in Rat. Their bond, forged through shared adventures and quiet moments alike, was as deep and enduring as the river itself. Mole's whiskers quivered with contentment as he and Rat sat on the bank, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. The river flowed on, a constant companion, full of promise and possibility. In that moment, Mole knew with certainty that he had found where he truly belonged. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, a chill wind swept across the river, carrying with it the first hints of winter. Mole shivered, not just from the cold, but from a strange, inexplicable feeling that tugged at the edges of his contentment. His gaze was drawn to the dark line of trees that marked the edge of the wild wood. Something about those shadowy depths called to him, stirring a curiosity he couldn't quite explain. As night fell, Mole found himself wondering what secrets those woods might hold, and what new adventures awaited him beyond the familiar comfort of the riverbank. Winter's crisp chill crept into the air, settling over the countryside like a frosty blanket. It was during this time that Mole found himself consumed by an insatiable curiosity about the wild wood. The mysterious tales of its inhabitants and hidden wonders danced through his mind, igniting a spark of adventure within him. He'd spend hours gazing out of his snug burrow, imagining the secrets that lay hidden beneath the snow-laden branches. Rat, ever the cautious friend, noticed Mole's growing fascination with concern. One evening, as they sat by the crackling fire, Rat's whiskers twitched nervously. "Mole, my dear fellow," he began, his voice gentle but firm, "I must warn you about the wild wood. It's no place for the faint of heart." Mole's eyes widened, a mix of excitement and apprehension flickering in their depths. "But why, Ratty? What's so dangerous about it?" Rat sighed, his paw absently stroking his tail. "There are creatures there that would sooner harm you than welcome you. The wood has changed over the years, grown wilder, more unpredictable." But Mole's enthusiasm couldn't be dampened. His eyes sparkled with determination as he pleaded, "Oh, please, Ratty, just one little adventure. What harm could come of it? We could go together." Rat looked into his friend's eager face, feeling his resolve weaken. The fire popped and hissed, casting dancing shadows across the room. Finally, he conceded, "Very well, but we must be careful. We'll visit Badger. He lives deep in the wood, and he'll keep us safe." On a day when the sky hung heavy with snow, they set out. The air was crisp and biting, their breath forming little clouds in front of their faces. At first, the woodland was familiar and friendly, with squirrels chittering and birds flitting from branch to branch. The snow crunched pleasantly beneath their paws, and Mole's heart soared with excitement. But as they ventured deeper, the atmosphere shifted. The trees seemed to grow taller, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. The cheerful sounds of the forest faded, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the occasional creak of wood or rustle of unseen creatures. The very air seemed to thicken, pressing in around them. Mole's initial excitement began to waver. "Ratty," he whispered, his voice small against the looming forest, "are you sure we're going the right way?" Rat's confident stride faltered. He glanced around, realizing with a sinking feeling that the landmarks he knew had disappeared under a thick blanket of snow. We must be close," he said, trying to sound more certain than he felt. As they trudged on, the snow began to fall more heavily. The world around them became a swirling white, obscuring their vision and muffling their footsteps. The cold seeped through their fur, chilling them to the bone. Mole shivered, pulling his scarf tighter around his neck. Mole's earlier bravado had completely evaporated. "Oh, Ratty," he whimpered, his eyes wide with fear. "I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. We should never have come here." Rat put a comforting paw on Mole's shoulder, even as his own heart raced with worry. "Don't fret, old chap. We'll find our way." But even Rat's reassurances couldn't dispel the growing sense of dread. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of their vision, and unfriendly eyes glinted in the darkness between the trees. The wind howled, carrying with it sounds that might have been snarls or might have been tricks of the mind. Suddenly, a harsh laugh cut through the air like a knife. "Well, well," sneered a voice. "What have we here?" A group of weasels and stoats emerged from the gloom, their sharp teeth bared in unfriendly grins. Their eyes glinted with malice, and Mole felt his blood run cold. "Just passing through," Rat said firmly, pushing Mole behind him protectively. His paw trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "Oh, I don't think so," one of the weasels hissed, taking a menacing step forward. "You're trespassing in our territory." Heart pounding, Rat grabbed Mole's paw. "Run!" he shouted, and they plunged through the snow, the angry shouts of their pursuers echoing behind them. They ran until their lungs burned, stumbling through drifts and ducking under low-hanging branches. The world became a blur of white and dark, the snarls of their pursuers growing closer with each passing moment. Just when it seemed they couldn't go on, Mole's foot caught on something hard hidden beneath the snow. He tumbled forward, dragging Rat down with him. "What in the world?" Rat muttered, brushing snow away to reveal. "A boot scraper?" Mole's eyes widened, a spark of hope igniting in his chest. "Ratty, look! This must mean civilization!" Rat finished excitedly. "Quick, help me search." Their paws scrabbled through the snow until they found it, a door cleverly concealed in the side of a snow-covered bank. Without hesitation, they pushed it open and tumbled inside, slamming it shut behind them just as the angry voices of the weasels and stoats reached a crescendo outside. They found themselves in a warm, welcoming tunnel that led to a vast network of underground chambers. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and cooking, and a gruff but kind voice called out, "Who goes there?" "It's us, Badger," Rat called back, relief evident in his voice. "Rat and Mole." Badger emerged from one of the chambers, his eyes twinkling with surprise and warmth. "Well, well," he rumbled, "what brings you two out on such a dreadful day?" As they warmed themselves by Badger's roaring fire, their fur slowly drying and their spirits lifting, Mole and Rat recounted their harrowing adventure. Badger listened intently, occasionally shaking his head at their foolishness, but clearly glad they were safe. "The wild wood isn't what it once was," Badger said sadly, settling into his favorite armchair. "There was a time when all creatures lived in harmony here, but greed and fear have twisted some hearts." As the winter raged outside, the three friends found comfort in each other's company. They shared stories, enjoyed hearty meals, and strengthened the bonds of their friendship. Mole, chastened by his brush with danger, listened eagerly to Badger's tales of the wood's history and the wisdom of respecting nature's power. In the safety of Badger's cozy home, surrounded by the warmth of friendship, Mole learned valuable lessons about heeding warnings and the importance of experience. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, he found that sometimes the greatest adventures are found in the simple joys of companionship and the comfort of a warm hearth on a cold winter's night. As the weeks passed, Mole grew restless once more. The coziness of Badger's home, once a welcome refuge, began to feel confining. He longed to see the sky again, to feel the wind on his face. One night, as he lay awake listening to the howling wind outside, a strange sound caught his attention. It was faint at first, barely audible over the storm, but it grew clearer, a haunting, melodious tune that seemed to call to him. Mole sat up, his heart racing. What could it be? And why did he feel an overwhelming urge to follow it? The gentle warmth of spring was just beginning to thaw the frozen landscape outside, promising new adventures and fresh beginnings. But as Mole crept towards Badger's door, drawn by the mysterious music, he couldn't shake the feeling that something both wonderful and terrifying awaited him in the awakening world outside. The gentle warmth of spring began to thaw the frozen landscape. Mole and Rat stirred from their cozy winter hideaway, ready to embrace the awakening world outside. As they emerged from their den, the crisp air filled their lungs, carrying the sweet scent of blooming flowers. Birdsong echoed through the trees, a cheerful symphony welcoming the new season. Mole blinked, his eyes adjusting to the bright sunlight that dappled the forest floor. Beside him, Rat stretched his limbs, working out the stiffness of their long hibernation. "Shall we pay a visit to Old Toad?" Rat suggested, his whiskers twitching with anticipation. "I wonder what new fancy has caught his eye this time." As they approached Toad Hall, an unfamiliar sound reached their ears. It was a deep, mechanical roar that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their paws. Mole's fur stood on end, a shiver of unease running down his spine. They rounded the corner to find Toad standing proudly next to a gleaming motor car. Its polished surface reflected the sunlight like a mirror, momentarily blinding them. Toad's eyes sparkled with an almost manic glee as he bounced on his heels. "My dear friends," Toad exclaimed, his voice pitched high with excitement. "You simply must see my latest acquisition. Isn't she a beauty?" Mole and Rat exchanged worried glances. They knew all too well Toad's tendency to become obsessed with new fads, but this seemed different somehow. The way Toad lovingly stroked the car's hood, the feverish excitement in his voice as he described its speed and power, It was clear this was more than just a passing fancy. "Come now," Toad insisted, practically dragging them towards the vehicle. "We must go for a drive. You'll see why these marvelous machines are the future." Despite their reservations, Mole and Rat found themselves ushered into the car. The leather seats creaked beneath them, the unfamiliar smell of oil and gasoline filling their nostrils. Toad revved the engine, a sound like a sleeping dragon awakening. With a lurch that nearly sent Mole tumbling, they were off, tearing down the country lanes at a speed that made the world blur around them. Toad's reckless driving soon became apparent. He took corners at breakneck speeds, the tires screeching in protest. Other travelers on the road dove for cover as the car barreled past, leaving a trail of dust and frightened animals in its wake. Mole gripped the seat with white-knuckled paws, his heart pounding like a drum. Rat, usually so calm and collected, found himself muttering prayers under his breath. As the days passed, Toad's obsession only grew. He spent lavishly on driving gear, goggles, leather gloves, and a cap that he wore at a jaunty angle. The once pristine gardens of Toad Hall fell into disrepair, weeds sprouting where manicured lawns once stood. Toad neglected his duties, spending all his time tinkering with engines or racing down roads. His boasting became insufferable. "Did I tell you about the time I outran a train?" he'd say to anyone who'd listen, his tales growing more outlandish with each retelling. The other animals of the riverbank began to whisper and shake their heads, concerned for their once respected neighbor. Toad's recklessness escalated alarmingly. He sideswiped fences, scattered chickens, and left a wake of destruction wherever he went. The peaceful countryside now echoed with the constant roar of engines and screeching brakes. Mole and Rat watched in horror as their friend transformed into a menace, his reputation crumbling like the stone walls he occasionally crashed through. One particularly harrowing afternoon, they witnessed Toad narrowly avoid a head-on collision with a horse-drawn cart. The driver's angry shouts faded into the distance as Toad sped away, laughing maniacally. The acrid smell of burning rubber lingered in the air, a stark reminder of how close they had come to disaster. As twilight settled over the riverbank, casting long shadows across the land, Mole turned to Rat with determination in his eyes. The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "We can't let this go on," Mole said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "For Toad's sake, and for everyone else's." Rat nodded gravely, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a solemn resolve. "You're right, old friend, but how can we stop him? You know how stubborn Toad can be." As if in answer to their question, the distant roar of Toad's motor car echoed through the evening air, growing louder with each passing second. Mole and Rat exchanged a look of grim determination. They knew what they had to do, but the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty. With hearts pounding and paws trembling, they steeled themselves for the challenge that lay ahead. The fate of their friend and perhaps the entire riverbank now rested in their hands. Mole and Rat embarked on a crucial mission. Their goal was to help their friend Toad overcome his dangerous obsession with motor cars. The warm summer breeze rustled through the leaves as the two friends made their way along the winding path to Toad Hall. The grand mansion loomed before them, its imposing facade a stark reminder of Toad's family legacy. Mole's fur bristled with nervous energy, while Rat's whiskers twitched anxiously. "Do you think he'll listen to us, Mole?" Rat asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mole squeezed his friend's paw reassuringly. "We must try, Ratty, for Toad's sake." The sweet scent of blooming roses filled the air as they approached the entrance. The door creaked open, revealing a world of opulence that seemed to mock their humble concerns. They found Toad in his study, a room that reeked of leather and motor oil. Glossy automobile magazines littered every surface, and miniature car models gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Toad's eyes shone with an almost manic gleam as he regaled them with tales of his latest driving adventures. "You should have seen me, chaps," Toad exclaimed, puffing out his chest like a proud peacock. "I took that turn at breakneck speed, leaving all those slow coaches in the dust." Mole and Rat exchanged worried glances, their hearts heavy with concern. They tried to steer the conversation towards their old pastimes, lazy afternoons on the river, picnics in the wildwood. But Toad dismissed these ideas with a wave of his webbed hand. Boating? Picnicking? Pah! He scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Nothing compares to the thrill of the open road, the wind in your face, the power at your fingertips. As Toad's enthusiasm grew, so did Mole and Rat's desperation. The air in the study grew thick with tension, like a storm about to break. It was clear that their gentle approach wasn't working. They needed reinforcements. Enter Badger, the wise and imposing forest dweller. His arrival was like a gust of cold wind, bringing a new level of gravity to the intervention. The three friends confronted Toad, their voices a chorus of concern and frustration. Badger's deep, rumbling voice filled the room, seeming to make the very walls tremble. Toad, this madness must stop. You're a danger to yourself and others. Until you come to your senses, you'll be confined to your bedroom. Toad's eyes widened in disbelief, his green skin paling visibly. Confined? Me? Preposterous! He launched into a grandiose speech about his rights and the joys of motoring, his words bouncing off the walls like rubber balls. But his friends stood firm, unmoved by his theatrics. They took turns guarding him, trying to educate him about the risks and responsibilities of driving. Days crawled by like molasses, each hour marked by Toad's tantrums and dramatic soliloquies that echoed through the halls of Toad Hall. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Toad's demeanor began to change. His outbursts became less frequent, his tone more subdued. Hope bloomed in the hearts of his friends, fragile as the first spring flowers. Perhaps at last their intervention was working. One evening, as Rat stood guard, his ears pricked up at the sound of Toad's voice, weak and trembling, from behind the door. "Oh, Ratty, I fear I'm dreadfully ill. Such pain. I need a doctor, quickly." Rat's heart raced, torn between suspicion and concern. Could Toad truly be sick? Or was this another of his tricks? The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. "Hold on, Toad. I'll fetch help," he called, scurrying off to find a doctor, his paws pattering against the polished floors. In that moment of solitude, Toad's true nature revealed itself. Quick as a flash, he tricked the unsuspecting maid into entering his room. With a strength born of desperation, he overpowered her and made his escape, his heart pounding with exhilaration. As Toad disappeared into the night, his maniacal laughter echoing in the distance, his friends were left behind, their faces a mixture of shock, disappointment, and worry. The cool night air carried the scent of impending trouble, as tangible as the dew on the grass. What new adventures and misadventures awaited Toad in his newfound freedom? The answer hung in the air like a storm cloud, promising a tempest of chaos that would soon engulf them all. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, one thing was certain. Toad's escape was just the beginning of a wild and unpredictable journey that would test the bonds of their friendship like never before. Toad's escape from confinement sent shockwaves through the animal community. His newfound freedom unleashed a whirlwind of chaos and excitement, propelling him into a wild adventure that would test the limits of his recklessness. The sun beat down on Toad's slick green skin as he waddled into a nearby town, his heart pounding with anticipation. The air buzzed with the hum of engines and chatter of townsfolk, but Toad had eyes for only one thing: automobiles. His gaze darted from one shiny vehicle to another, each one a tempting morsel of mechanical wonder. Suddenly, there it was, a gleaming motor car, unattended and practically begging to be driven. Toad's webbed fingers twitched, his breath quickening as he approached. With surprising agility for his portly frame, he clambered into the driver's seat, the leather cool against his skin. The key was in the ignition, and Toad couldn't resist. He turned it, and the engine roared to life, sending a shiver of excitement down his spine. "Poop, poop!" he cried, his trademark call echoing off the buildings as he slammed his foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement. Toad's maniacal laughter mixed with the rush of wind as he sped recklessly through the countryside. Fields of golden wheat blurred into streaks of yellow, punctuated by the occasional startled cow or bewildered farmer. But Toad's joyride wasn't going unnoticed. The wail of sirens pierced through his euphoria, growing louder with each passing moment. Glancing in the rearview mirror, Toad saw flashing lights reflecting like angry fireflies, closing in fast. His webbed hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles turning a pale green. Toad's eyes narrowed with determination, a mischievous glint sparkling within. He fancied himself a master of evasion, a slippery amphibian too clever to be caught. With a sharp turn of the wheel, he veered off the road. The car bounced and jostled as it tore through a farmer's field, leaving a wake of flattened crops. The smell of crushed wheat filled the air, mixing with the acrid scent of burning rubber. The chase intensified, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. Toad's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. He took hairpin turns at breakneck speeds, the car teetering on two wheels before slamming back down with bone-jarring force. In a moment of desperation, Toad spotted a shallow river ahead. "They'll never follow me through there," he thought, plunging the car into the water with a tremendous splash. The engine sputtered and coughed as Toad urged it forward, water lapping at the doors and seeping into his shoes. But Toad's luck had run its course. As he emerged from the river, soaked and slightly less cocky, he misjudged a turn. The world spun around him, trees and sky blending into a dizzying kaleidoscope as the car careened out of control. With a sickening crunch of metal and the tinkle of shattered glass, the vehicle came to rest in a roadside ditch. Dazed and disoriented, Toad barely had time to catch his breath before rough hands hauled him from the wreckage. The world swam back into focus, revealing the stern faces of police officers surrounding him. His grand adventure had come to an inglorious end. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Toad was brought before the judge. Despite his predicament, Toad's arrogance remained intact. He puffed out his chest, ready to dazzle the court with his charm and status. "Your Honor," Toad began, his voice dripping with false humility, "surely you can understand the irresistible allure of the open road? The thrill of the engine's purr, the wind in one's, warts?" The judge's expression remained impassive, unmoved by Toad's grandiose speech. His gavel came down with a resounding thwack, silencing Toad's rambling and sending a shudder through the courtroom. 20 years, the judge declared, his voice as cold and unyielding as iron, for car theft, dangerous driving, and gross impertinence in the face of the law. Toad's jaw dropped, his bravado evaporating like morning mist. As he was led away in chains, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into his wrists, a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. Word of Toad's imprisonment spread quickly through the animal community. In the cozy burrows and hollows of the riverbank, his friends gathered, their faces etched with concern. Badger's usually gruff demeanor softened with worry, while Ratty and Mole exchanged anxious glances. As night fell over the peaceful countryside, a somber mood settled over the animal kingdom. The adventures of the day faded into memory, leaving behind a web of worry and the faint hope of redemption for their troubled friend. But as the animals prepared for bed, a chill wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. In the distance, barely visible in the gathering gloom, the grand estate of Toad Hall stood silent and neglected. Its windows, dark and shuttered, seemed to watch over the land like mournful eyes, hinting at troubles yet to come. The grand estate of Toad Hall loomed before them, its windows dark and shuttered like mournful eyes. A chill wind rustled through the overgrown gardens, carrying the scent of neglect and uncertainty. Badger, Rat, and Mole exchanged determined glances before stepping across the threshold, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous foyer. "Right then," Badger growled, his gruff voice masking a hint of concern. "We've got work to do." The trio spread out, each assuming a role that played to their strengths. Badger, with his keen tactical mind, took charge of security. His beady eyes scanned every nook and cranny, noting weak points and potential entry routes for ne'er-do-wells. "We'll need to reinforce these gates," he muttered, sketching plans in the dirt with a sturdy claw, "and set up a watch rotation. Can't be too careful with those weasels about." Rat, ever the practical one, dove into managing the household affairs. He scurried from room to room, his whiskers twitching with purpose as he directed the remaining staff. "Now then," he chirped to a group of nervous maids, his voice gentle but firm, "let's ensure Mr. Toad's prized possessions are properly dusted, shall we? We want everything shipshape for his return." Mole, feeling most at home with his paws in the earth, found solace in tending to the sprawling gardens. He hummed softly as he pruned roses and trimmed hedges, transforming the once neglected grounds into a verdant paradise. The sweet scent of blooming flowers seemed to lift the spirits of all who passed by, a small beacon of hope in uncertain times. As days turned to weeks, the friends uncovered hidden wonders within Toad Hall. Behind a creaking bookcase, they discovered a narrow passageway leading to a forgotten tower room. Cobwebs clung to their fur as they climbed the winding stairs, their hearts pounding with excitement. "Look!" Mole exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. "You can see for miles up here." In the cellar, Rat's keen nose led them to a cache of vintage wines, each bottle telling a story of Toad family history. The musty air was thick with the scent of oak and aged grapes as they carefully catalogued each treasure. Their vigilance was soon put to the test. Curious neighbors, their whiskers twitching with gossip, came sniffing around the property. Rat's quick wit proved invaluable in deflecting probing questions. "Oh, Mr. Toad? Why, he's on an extended holiday." "Quite hush-hush, you understand," he'd say with a wink and a smile, sending the nosy visitors on their way. Opportunistic weasels and stoats, emboldened by Toad's absence, attempted to pilfer valuables under cover of darkness. But Badger's intimidating presence sent most intruders scurrying away, their tails between their legs. One moonlit night, as Mole patrolled the gardens, he spotted a shadowy figure lurking in the shrubbery. His heart raced, but he stood his ground, brandishing a rake like a weapon. "Who goes there?" he called out, his voice quavering only slightly. To his surprise and relief, it was only a startled hedgehog who apologized profusely for the intrusion. Legal matters and financial woes, like storm clouds on the horizon, threatened to overwhelm them. Stacks of unpaid bills and angry letters from creditors piled up on Toad's ornate desk. The friends huddled together, poring over ledgers by lamplight, determined to keep Toad's legacy intact. "We can't let it all fall apart," Rat said softly, his usual cheer dampened by worry. "Toad may be a fool, but he's our fool." Mole nodded, patting his friend's paw. "And when he returns, we'll help him see reason." As twilight settled over Toad Hall each evening, the three gathered in the cozy library. The crackling fire cast dancing shadows on the walls as they debated strategies for reforming their wayward friend. "Perhaps a strict schedule," Rat suggested, sketching out a timetable. Badger shook his head, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Toad needs firm boundaries and consequences. It's the only way he'll learn." Mole, curled up in an overstuffed armchair, offered a gentler approach. "What if we show him the joy of simple pleasures? A quiet picnic by the river, or tending to the garden?" Their discussions often stretched late into the night, fueled by concern for their friend and hope for his future. As they protected Toad's home and legacy, the bonds between Badger, Rat, and Mole grew stronger. They found strength in their differences, laughter in shared moments of absurdity, and comfort in knowing they could rely on one another through any challenge. In Toad's absence, they had become more than friends. They were a family, united by loyalty and a shared mission. And as they faced each new day at Toad Hall, they knew that together they could weather any storm that came their way. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Badger's ears perked up at an unfamiliar sound. A commotion was brewing in the village, whispers of a daring jailbreak spreading like wildfire. The trio exchanged worried glances, their hearts racing with a mixture of hope and dread. Could it be? Had their impulsive friend taken matters into his own hands once again? Little did they know, at that very moment, Toad was huddled in his prison cell, his mind ablaze with schemes of escape. The real adventure was only just beginning. Toad sat in his prison cell, his mind a whirlwind of restless thoughts. Unwilling to serve his full sentence, he began plotting his daring escape to freedom. The dank walls of his cell pressed in on him, the musty air thick with the scent of despair. But Toad's spirit, irrepressible as ever, refused to be cowed by his grim surroundings. His webbed feet patted softly on the cold stone floor as he paced back and forth, each step echoing his determination. The dim light filtering through the barred window cast long shadows, but in Toad's eyes there was a spark, a glimmer of hope and mischief that refused to be extinguished. Fortune, it seemed, had not entirely abandoned our amphibious friend. The jailer's daughter, a kind-hearted young woman with a penchant for lost causes, found herself drawn to Toad's natural charm. Her visits became a lifeline, a splash of color in the dreary monotony of prison life. With each meal she brought, Toad seized the opportunity to weave tales of his grand lifestyle. His words painted vivid pictures of Toad Hall's splendor, the lush gardens, the exhilarating adventures, the life of luxury he'd left behind. His voice, rich with emotion, brought these stories to life, transforming the stark cell into a canvas of imagination. "Oh, my dear," he'd say, his eyes wide and sincere, "if only I could make amends for my foolish actions. I've learned my lesson, truly I have." The remorse in his voice was palpable, tugging at the young woman's heartstrings. Day by day, Toad watched her resolve weaken, like ice melting under the warm sun of his charm. He bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. That moment came one fateful evening as she brought in his dinner tray. "My dear sweet girl," he implored, his voice low and urgent, "you alone can help me. Think of the good I could do if I were free." His eyes, wide and pleading, bore into hers, willing her to understand. She hesitated, torn between duty and sympathy. Toad pressed on, his words a soothing balm to her conflicted conscience. "I promise you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you'll be rewarded handsomely for your kindness." In the end, compassion won out over caution. With trembling hands, she helped Toad procure a washerwoman's outfit, the perfect disguise for his audacious plan. The night of his breakout arrived, bringing with it a cocktail of excitement and fear that set Toad's heart racing. He donned the dress with surprising grace, arranging the bonnet just so. As he gazed at his reflection in a small shard of mirror, he marveled at the transformation. Where once stood the aristocratic Toad, now there was only a humble washerwoman, albeit one with unusually smooth skin and a rather rotund figure. With a deep breath to steady his nerves, Toad began his escape. He moved with surprising agility for one so portly, slipping past the drowsy guards like a shadow. Each creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of panic through him, but fortune smiled upon our amphibious hero. Once beyond the prison walls, Toad's real adventure began. The world outside was a paradox, both familiar and strange, a place of promise and peril. The cool night air caressed his face, carrying with it the scent of freedom and the promise of home. Toad's journey was a masterclass in improvisation. He hitchhiked, his voice pitched high as he spun tales to unsuspecting drivers. "Oh, dearie me," he'd trill, his falsetto impressively convincing. "My poor old mother is sick, and I must get to her quickly." On trains, he became a master of stealth, tucking himself away among suitcases and parcels. Every whistle of the locomotive sent a thrill through him. Each mile took him closer to home, to freedom. The rhythmic clacking of the wheels on the tracks became a lullaby, soothing his frayed nerves. But the journey was far from easy. Toad trudged through muddy fields, his dress hem caked with dirt. He crept through dark forests, jumping at every snapping twig. The rustling leaves seemed to whisper warnings, and the shadows played tricks on his eyes. All the while, he clung to his disguise like a lifeline, the scratchy fabric of the dress a constant reminder of his precarious situation. Close calls with the law kept Toad on his toes. More than once, he found himself face to face with suspicious policemen. Their eyes narrowed as they took in his ample figure and oddly smooth skin. The thud of his heart seemed loud enough to give him away, but Toad's quick wit never failed him. "Just a poor washerwoman, dearies," he'd simper, batting his eyelashes furiously. "Don't mind old me, I'm harmless as can be." His act was so convincing that even he almost believed it at times. As he journeyed on, relying on his wits and the occasional kindness of strangers, Toad found himself with ample time for reflection. The discomfort of sleeping in ditches, the gnawing hunger in his belly. These hardships began to chip away at his arrogance. The stars above seemed to mock his predicament, twinkling merrily in the vast expanse of the night sky. He thought of his friends, loyal Badger, kind Mole, and steadfast Ratty. How had he repaid their friendship? With recklessness and selfishness. The weight of his actions settled on him like a heavy cloak, each step bringing a new realization of the pain he must have caused them. In quiet moments as he gazed at starry skies or listened to the whisper of wind through leaves, Toad felt something shifting within him. It was as if the journey was not just taking him home, but also leading him to a new understanding of himself. The road ahead was long, but with each step he was not just moving closer to Toad Hall, but also to a new version of himself. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Toad's heart soared. He could see the familiar outline of Toad Hall in the distance, a beacon of hope after his long and arduous journey. But as he drew closer, something seemed amiss. The windows were dark, the grounds eerily quiet. A chill ran down Toad's spine as he realized that in his absence, something had gone terribly wrong. Little did he know that his beloved Toad Hall, left vulnerable in his absence, had become a target for those with mischief in mind. Toad's absence had left Toad Hall vulnerable. His friends, preoccupied with guarding the estate, failed to notice the opportunity for mischief that had arisen. The wildwood bristled with anticipation. Weasels, stoats, and ferrets gathered in the shadows, their eyes glinting with malice in the fading light. For days they had watched Toad Hall from afar, studying the movements of badger, rat, and mole like hungry predators stalking their prey. As night fell, an eerie silence blanketed the forest. The wildwooders crept forward, their paws barely disturbing the carpet of fallen leaves. They surrounded Toad Hall like a creeping fog, their breath held in collective anticipation. Suddenly the night exploded into chaos. Battle cries pierced the air as the invaders burst from the undergrowth. Badger, rat, and mole, caught off guard, scrambled to defend their friend's home. But the wildwooders had planned well, using their intimate knowledge of the forest to create clever diversions. Smoke billowed from strategic points around the property, obscuring vision and confusing the defenders. Badger's deep voice boomed orders, but his words were swallowed by the din of the attack. Rat darted back and forth, his usually calm demeanor replaced by frantic energy. Mole, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught, could only watch in horror as the invaders swarmed over the walls and through the windows of Toad Hall. Inside, the once pristine rooms quickly descended into mayhem. The wildwooders reveled in their victory, their raucous laughter echoing through the halls. They raided the wine cellar, uncorking bottles with reckless abandon. The sweet scent of Toad's finest vintages mingled with the musty odor of unwashed fur, creating a nauseating cocktail of aromas. In the grand dining room, a feast of epic proportions began. The invaders gorged themselves on delicacies meant for far more refined palates. Crumbs and bones littered the floor like fallen leaves after an autumn storm, crunching underfoot as the wildwooders danced and caroused. Upstairs, the bedrooms became stages for wild performances. Weasels pranced about in Toad's finest clothes, their antics a mockery of the absent owner's vanity. Stoats bounced on the beds, sending feathers from torn pillows floating through the air like snow, creating a surreal scene of destruction and revelry. In the library, ferrets tore pages from priceless books, using them to fuel a bonfire in the fireplace. The flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, dancing in time with the invaders' gleeful destruction. The acrid smell of burning paper filled the air, a testament to the wildwooders' disregard for culture and refinement. Outside, the once manicured gardens fell victim to careless feet. Flower beds were trampled, statues toppled, and fountains clogged with debris. The wildwooders' revelry spilled out onto the grounds, turning the peaceful oasis into a chaotic playground. The sound of breaking stone and tearing foliage mingled with the invaders' whoops of joy. As dawn broke, the invaders set about fortifying their new stronghold. Furniture was piled against doors and windows, creating makeshift barricades. Lookouts were posted at strategic points, their keen eyes scanning the surrounding area for any sign of a counterattack. The once welcoming Toad Hall now bristled with hostility, a fortress in the hands of the enemy. Meanwhile, Badger, Rat, and Mole retreated to the safety of Badger's underground home. The weight of their failure hung heavy on their shoulders. Badger paced back and forth, his usually confident stride now hesitant and uncertain. Rat sat in silence, his whiskers drooping with worry. Mole, ever the optimist, tried to lift their spirits, but even his gentle words seemed to fall flat in the face of their defeat. As they huddled together in the warm glow of Badger's hearth, the friends began to formulate a plan. They knew they had to act quickly to reclaim Toad Hall and restore order to their beloved riverbank community. Rat suggested reaching out to their woodland allies for information, while Mole proposed sneaking back to the hall under cover of darkness to assess the situation. Badger nodded gravely, his eyes glinting with determination. "We must be clever," he rumbled, "and we must be swift. Toad Hall has weathered many storms, my friends, and it shall weather this one too." As night fell once more, the three friends set out into the forest. They moved silently, their senses alert for any sign of danger. They gathered intelligence from sympathetic woodland creatures, piecing together a picture of the Wild Wooders' defenses. With each bit of information, their resolve grew stronger. They would find a weakness, they would exploit it, and they would take back what was rightfully theirs. In the distance, Toad Hall stood silhouetted against the starry sky, a beacon of hope and a reminder of the challenge that lay ahead. The friends exchanged determined glances, knowing that the real battle was yet to come. As they prepared to put their plan into action, a distant commotion caught their attention. Through the trees, they spotted a figure stumbling along the road, a washerwoman, moving with an oddly familiar gait. Could it be? The friends held their breath, hope and uncertainty mingling in their hearts. Was Toad finally returning home, oblivious to the chaos that awaited him? Toad's journey home was far from over. As he continued on his way, disguised as a washerwoman, he faced numerous obstacles that would test both his resolve and his character. The merciless sun beat down on the dusty road, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Toad's webbed feet ached with every step, blisters forming beneath the coarse fabric of his borrowed shoes. The dress clung to his amphibian skin like a damp, suffocating blanket, a constant reminder of his predicament. Sweat trickled down his back, and he longed for the cool, refreshing waters of his beloved river. As he trudged along, lost in self-pity, the distant rumble of wheels caught his attention. His heart leaped with hope as a horse-drawn caravan approached, its weathered wood creaking a siren song of potential salvation. Seizing the opportunity, Toad waved his arms frantically, his voice taking on a high-pitched warble as he called out, "Yoo-hoo! Might I trouble you for a ride, kind sir?" The caravan slowed to a stop, and a grizzled face peered out from beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The owner, a gypsy with eyes that sparkled with both kindness and shrewdness, looked Toad up and down. "And what might you offer in exchange for a ride, washerwoman?" Toad's mind raced, his thoughts scattering like leaves in a gust of wind. What could he possibly offer? Then in a moment of inspiration, or perhaps desperation, he blurted out, "Why, I can cook and clean for you, sir. A fair trade for your generosity, wouldn't you say?" The gypsy's weathered face cracked into a smile, revealing a set of yellow teeth. "Fair enough. Hop aboard then." As Toad clambered onto the caravan, the wooden steps creaking under his weight, he had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into. For the first time in his privileged life, he was about to experience real work. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Toad's soft, pampered hands blistered and cracked as he scrubbed pots and pans, the harsh soap leaving his skin raw and irritated. His back ached from sweeping and dusting the cramped caravan, muscles he never knew existed, screaming in protest. And don't even get him started on the cooking. More than once, he nearly set the whole caravan ablaze with his culinary experiments, the acrid smell of burnt food filling the air and making his eyes water. But as the days wore on, something strange began to happen. Toad found himself enjoying it. There was a peculiar satisfaction in seeing a stack of clean dishes gleaming in the sunlight, in tasting a meal he'd prepared with his own hands, even if it was a bit burnt around the edges. For the first time, he understood the pride that came from honest work, the simple joy of a job well done. In the evenings, as they sat around the campfire, the flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. Toad listened to the gypsies' tales of life on the road. Stories of market days filled with laughter and haggling, of starry nights spent beneath vast open skies. Toad found himself captivated by these simple pleasures, so different from the extravagant parties and reckless adventures he'd once craved. The gypsies' words painted pictures in his mind, vivid and alive, of a world he'd never known existed. Their journey wasn't without its close calls. At a bustling market, the air thick with the scent of spices and the cacophony of haggling voices, Toad's heart nearly stopped when he spotted a policeman eyeing him suspiciously. He ducked behind a stall, his knees knocking together as he prayed not to be discovered. The rough wood of the stall dug into his back as he held his breath, every second feeling like an eternity. By some miracle, he managed to lose himself in the crowd, slipping away like a fish in a stream, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. It was at this same market that Toad overheard whispers that made his blood run cold. "Did you hear about Toad Hall?" one gossip said to another, their voices carrying over the din of the market. "Overrun by those ruffians from the wild wood it is. Such a shame." Toad's webbed fingers clenched into fists, a fire igniting in his belly. How dare they? His beautiful home, his ancestral seat, in the hands of those hooligans. He vowed then and there to reclaim what was rightfully his mind already racing with plans of grand confrontations and heroic victories. But as the miles rolled by and the riverbank drew nearer, Toad found his anger tempered by something else: reflection. For the first time in his life, he truly looked at himself, at the Toad he'd been. He saw his arrogance, his selfishness, his utter disregard for the feelings of others. And he felt ashamed. The weight of his past actions settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak, impossible to ignore. He thought of Ratty, dear old Ratty, always ready with a kind word and a helping hand. Of Mole, so gentle and loyal, his eyes always shining with admiration that Toad now realized he'd never deserved. And Badger, gruff but wise, who had tried so hard to set him on the right path. They had stood by him through thick and thin, even when he'd been at his worst. And how had he repaid them? With thoughtlessness and ingratitude. As the familiar scent of the river filled his nostrils, a mixture of mud and reeds and home, Toad felt a change stirring within him. It was as if the scales had fallen from his eyes, revealing a world far richer and more complex than he'd ever imagined. He realized that true friendship, true loyalty, were worth more than all the motor cars in the world. With each step closer to home, Toad's mind whirred with plans. He would make things right. He would reclaim Toad Hall, yes, but more importantly, he would reclaim the friendships he'd so carelessly taken for granted. He would become a Toad worthy of such steadfast companions. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Toad caught sight of a familiar bend in the river. He was almost home. His heart swelled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For Toad's journey had become more than just a physical return home. It was a journey of self-discovery and personal growth, preparing him for the trials that awaited at Toad Hall. Just as Toad was about to step onto the familiar path leading to his home, a rustling in the nearby bushes made him freeze. His heart pounding, he ducked behind a tree, peering out cautiously. Through the leaves, he caught a glimpse of a weasel scurrying by, muttering to itself. "Better warn the chief," it hissed. "Word's spreading about that Toad. We can't let him take back the hall." Toad's blood ran cold. They knew he was coming. But how? And what would he find when he finally reached Toad Hall? As night fell, shrouding the riverbank in shadows, Toad realized his homecoming might be far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Word of Toad's return spread like wildfire along the riverbank. The news set Badger's mind whirring with a plan to reclaim Toad Hall from the wild wooders who had taken it over. The old Badger, his gruff exterior masking a heart of gold, called for a clandestine meeting. As Rat, Mole, and the newly humbled Toad gathered in Badger's cozy underground home, the air crackled with anticipation. The warm glow of candlelight cast dancing shadows on the earthen walls, mirroring the flicker of hope in their eyes. Badger's eyes twinkled with excitement as he revealed his strategy, his voice low and conspiratorial. "My friends," he began, savoring the curious looks on his companions' faces, "there's something about Toad Hall that even Toad himself doesn't know." He paused, the silence thick with suspense. "There's a secret tunnel, built by Toad's ancestors, leading right into the heart of Toad Hall." Toad's eyes widened, his mouth falling open in surprise. "A secret tunnel? In my own home?" he gasped, his voice a mixture of disbelief and wonder. Badger nodded, a rare smile crossing his weathered face. "Hidden behind an old fireplace. It was meant as an escape route, but now it'll be our way in." As Badger laid out the details of his plan, the room buzzed with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The strategy was simple yet daring. They would use the hidden passage to surprise the Wildwooders during one of their raucous feasts. "Badger, you'll lead the charge," Rat said, his whiskers twitching with anticipation. "I'll secure the main entrance, and Mole, you'll be our lookout." All eyes turned to Toad, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. "And what about me?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain, like a leaf trembling in the wind. Badger placed a reassuring paw on Toad's shoulder, the warmth of his touch cutting through Toad's doubt. "You, my friend, will have the most important job of all. You'll be responsible for rounding up the invaders." Toad's face fell, his recent ordeals still weighing heavily on him like a sodden cloak. I don't know if I can," he stammered, doubt clouding his eyes like a fog over the river. Mole stepped forward, his gentle voice filled with encouragement. "Toad, this is your home, your family's legacy. If anyone can do this, it's you," Rat chimed in, his tone firm but kind. "Remember, Toad, it's not just about you. The whole riverbank community is counting on us." As these words sank in, something shifted in Toad's demeanor. His posture straightened, like a willow sapling finding its strength. A flicker of his old confidence returned to his eyes, a spark rekindling into a flame. "You're right," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "This is my responsibility. I won't let you down." With renewed purpose, the friends threw themselves into preparations. Days blurred together like watercolors on a canvas as they gathered makeshift weapons. Sticks and clubs that felt awkward in their paws but would serve their purpose. They practiced their roles tirelessly, their movements becoming more fluid and coordinated with each rehearsal, like a well-rehearsed dance. As they worked, the bond between them grew stronger, woven tight like the reeds along the riverbank. Laughter echoed through Badger's home as they shared stories and encouragement. Even Toad, humbled by his recent experiences, found himself swept up in the camaraderie, his spirits lifting like a kite caught in a gentle breeze. They timed their attack to coincide with a particularly large celebration planned by the Wildwooders. The night before the assault, a tense silence fell over the group, heavy as a blanket of fog. Each of them retreated into their thoughts, contemplating the challenges that lay ahead. Mole found Toad sitting alone by the river, his eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of Toad Hall, looming like a shadow against the starlit sky. "Nervous?" Mole asked gently, settling beside his friend. Toad nodded, his usual bravado absent. "What if I mess up again, Mole? What if I let everyone down?" His voice quivered like a leaf in the wind. Mole placed a comforting paw on Toad's arm. "You've changed, Toad. We've all seen it. You're not alone in this. We're all in it together." As dawn broke on the day of the attack, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the friends gathered one last time. The air crackled with tension and determination, like the calm before a storm. Badger looked at each of them in turn, his eyes filled with pride and resolve. "Remember," he said, his voice low and steady as the river's current, "we're not just fighting for Toad Hall. We're fighting for our home, for our way of life. Together we can do this." With a collective deep breath, they set off towards Toad Hall. The fate of their beloved riverbank hung in the balance, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they approached the secret tunnel, hidden behind a curtain of ivy, tension built like a dam about to burst. The friends steeled themselves for the challenge ahead, knowing that the fate of Toad Hall and the peace of the riverbank community hung by a thread. As night fell, casting long shadows across the landscape, Toad and his companions stood at the entrance of the secret tunnel. Their hearts pounded in unison, a rhythm of fear and determination. Toad's paw trembled as he reached for the hidden lever that would open the passage. With a deep breath, he pulled. The ancient mechanism groaned to life, and the wall before them began to shift. As the tunnel yawned open, revealing a dark, mysterious passage into the unknown, they exchanged one last look of resolve. It was time. The fate of Toad Hall and their very way of life rested on what would happen in the next few moments. The night of the planned attack had finally arrived. Toad and his friends, their hearts pounding with anticipation, made their way through the secret tunnel to enter Toad Hall undetected. The air in the tunnel was thick with tension, each breath coming in short, nervous gasps. The damp stone walls seemed to close in around them, echoing their footsteps like distant thunder. Toad's webbed fingers trembled as he led the way, his usually boastful demeanor replaced by a grim determination. As they emerged from the tunnel, the warm glow of candlelight washed over them, momentarily blinding after the darkness. The grand hall of Toad Hall stretched before them, a scene of raucous revelry. The wild wooders, oblivious to the impending attack, were in full feast mode. The scent of roasted meats and spilled ale hung heavy in the air, mingling with the acrid smell of tobacco smoke. The cacophony of laughter and clinking glasses assaulted their ears, each sound a painful reminder of the intruder's presence in Toad's ancestral home. Badger, his gray fur bristling with anger, raised his walking stick like a battle standard. "Now," he growled, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a thunderclap. His eyes glinted with fierce determination, reflecting the flickering candlelight. As one, they surged forward. Rat and Mole, armed with sticks and bolstered by unwavering loyalty, flanked their leader. Their small statures belied their courage, each step forward a testament to the strength of their friendship. Toad felt a surge of courage that wasn't born of bluster or bravado. This was his home, his heritage, and he would fight for it with every ounce of his being. The familiar halls and corridors, now defiled by the presence of the wild wooders, fueled his resolve. The wild wooders, caught mid-revelry, froze like deer in lamplight. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the clatter of dropped cutlery. Then chaos erupted. Badger led the charge, his walking stick a blur as he swatted and jabbed at the intruders. His powerful frame moved with surprising agility, each blow landing with precision and force. Rat and Mole, though smaller, fought with the tenacity of much larger creatures. They darted between the legs of their foes, tripping and confounding them at every turn. Toad, drawing on reserves of strength he never knew he possessed, threw himself into the fray. His knowledge of Toad Hall's layout proved invaluable as he outmaneuvered the wild wooders, herding them towards the exits where his friends lay in wait. His usually comical form now moved with purpose and grace, dodging blows and landing his own with surprising effectiveness. The battle raged through every room and corridor of Toad Hall. Priceless vases teetered and crashed to the floor, their delicate porcelain shattering like thunder. Paintings were knocked askew, the faces of Toad's ancestors seeming to watch the melee with stern disapproval. Furniture was overturned in the chaos, the crash of wood on stone adding to the din of battle. Yet for all their superior numbers, the wild wooders found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer determination of Toad and his friends. The tide of battle began to turn, the invaders' confidence crumbling in the face of such fierce resistance. As the fight wore on, Toad felt a curious mix of emotions wash over him. Pride in his friend's unwavering loyalty swelled in his chest, warming him from within. Shame at his past behavior that had led to this situation pricked at his conscience, each pang a reminder of his foolishness. And above all, a burning resolve to make things right blazed within him, fueling his every move. With a final push, the last of the wild wooders were driven from Toad Hall, their panicked cries fading into the night. Toad stood in the doorway, watching them flee, his chest heaving with exertion and emotion. The cool night air washed over him, carrying away the stench of battle and leaving behind the sweet scent of victory. In the aftermath, Toad surveyed the damage to his ancestral home. Broken glass crunched underfoot, and the once pristine halls bore the scars of battle. Yet as he looked at his friends, tired, disheveled, but triumphant, he felt a swell of gratitude that overshadowed any material loss. Without a word, Toad began to right an overturned chair. The simple act seemed to break a spell, and soon Badger, Rat, and Mole joined him. They worked in companionable silence to restore order to the chaos, the quiet broken only by the occasional grunt of effort or murmur of encouragement. As they worked, Toad felt a change settling over him, like a comfortable old coat he'd forgotten he owned. The weight of his past arrogance and selfishness seemed to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of responsibility and appreciation for true friendship. Days passed, and Toad Hall slowly regained its former glory. The broken windows were replaced, the overturned furniture restored to its rightful place, and the scars of battle were gradually erased. When at last the restoration was complete, Toad hosted a grand banquet, not to show off his wealth as he might have done in the past, but to thank his loyal friends. As they sat around the table enjoying good food and better company, Toad cleared his throat. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the host. "My friends," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you all more than I can ever repay. My behavior has been, well, toadish, to say the least. But I promise you, here and now, that I will change. I will strive to be the friend you all deserve." The sincerity in Toad's voice was unmistakable. Badger nodded approvingly, his gruff exterior softening for a moment. Rat and Mole exchanged glances of surprised delight, their eyes shining with happiness at their friend's transformation. As the evening wore on, laughter and warmth filled Toad Hall once more. The clink of glasses and the hum of friendly conversation replaced the sounds of battle that had echoed through these halls not so long ago. The rich aroma of good food and the soft glow of candlelight created an atmosphere of contentment and camaraderie. As the celebration wound down, they found themselves gathered by the grand fireplace, sharing stories and plans for the future. The dancing flames cast a warm light over their faces, highlighting the bonds of friendship that had been tested and strengthened by adversity. Toad, looking around at his dear friends, felt a sense of peace settle over him. The adventures of the past seemed to fade into insignificance compared to the simple joy of this moment. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As the last embers of the fire burned low, Toad and his friends made their way to their respective rooms, each step filled with the comfortable weariness that follows a day well spent. The halls of Toad Hall, once again a sanctuary of friendship and warmth, seemed to sigh contentedly as silence fell. In the soft glow of the setting sun, Toad stood at his bedroom window, looking out over his estate. The river glimmered in the distance, a ribbon of silver winding through the lush green landscape. As he watched, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree, its branches reaching toward the sky like outstretched arms. Toad smiled to himself, feeling a sense of belonging and purpose he had never known before. The future stretched out before him, full of promise and new adventures. But more importantly, it was a future filled with the warmth of true friendship, a treasure more valuable than all the motor cars and fine clothes in the world. As night fell and stars began to twinkle in the velvet sky, Toad closed his eyes, his heart full of gratitude. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but for now all was right in the world of the riverbank. And in that moment, surrounded by the love of his friends and the comfort of his home, Toad knew that he had finally found his place in the world.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.